Here we are. So, thank you very much for inviting me. I am Dimitris. I'm a research fellow at the University of Oxford, and my research focuses on food purchasing as well as developing interventions for dietary weight loss. And my studies are funded through public funds from the National Institute for Health Research. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how we can improve attitudes to foods through applying behavioral sciences and nudges, particularly focusing on the food purchasing and pretty much following on from Pascal's excellent presentation. So a little bit of context. We know that diet together with tobacco use are the two most important determinants of health. And as in the US, the same applies in the UK, where the diet at the population level is suboptimal as we eat quite a lot of sugars, saturated fats, salt, as well as calories. Now, trying to improve that at the population level has been very, very challenging, and therefore we need novel interventions to try and see how we can actually manage that. In this context, food purchasing is a very promising option because it is a key determinant of food consumption, and therefore that gives us a clear opportunity for an intervention with wide reach. Now, we can simplistically think of these interventions as those that target the individual and those that target the environment. And both speakers have touched upon those. So the individual level interventions, such as offering people a healthier alternative or a swap, require reflection and analytical decision-making. But many of our decisions about food are not reflective, but instead they are automatic reactions prompted by environmental cues. And therefore, there's quite a lot of interest on environmental level interventions, such as altering the default at the point of choice, the so-called choice architecture or nudging interventions. And as Gareth mentioned, it's quite challenging to run these interventions with retailers. So what we did was that we decided to take a step back and try to see if we can see an effect in the lab in an experimental online setting. So the aim of the first study, and I will present two of those today to you, was to test the effectiveness of an individual level intervention and environmental level intervention on the saturated fat content of the shopping basket during an online shopping experiment. So participants were recruited and they were asked to buy 10 items from a shopping list. These were all items that were high in saturated fat and for which alternatives with lower saturated fats were also existing. And we tried to look for food categories that were typical in the UK diet. We asked participants to buy one from each category and nothing more, and try to buy things that they and their family would typically eat. So what we did was that we recruited 1,240 people through Prolific, and we randomized them to either being offered a swap, either altering the default order of foods, both interventions combined, or a control group. In the first intervention, where we offered people a swap, people essentially went to our online supermarket where they could see the instructions, they could withdraw at any point, and they could essentially look for an item as with any other supermarket, either through the drop-down menu or by typing on the bar. So if, for example, somebody wanted a cheddar cheese, they will click on that, they will see all the products in random order, and they will click on the one that they wanted to buy. And at that stage, they will get a swap, which will be matched for brand, weight, and price. And they could choose to either keep this or stick with their original option. So this will be added to the trolley, and then they will continue doing that for the following 10 products, and then they're going to check out. In the second intervention, where we essentially changed the order of products and we ranked them based on the amount of saturated fat that they had, that meant that essentially what participants saw was that the products were in an ascending order of saturated fat. So this time, when people clicked for the cheddar cheese, what you see here is typically half-fat cheeses, lighter cheeses, and in the particular case of, here I am. So in this case, what you see is that participants saw half-fat cheeses and lighter cheeses pretty much in the whole first page. And it was only until the second page that they were actually able to see a real cheddar cheese. They could, as always, click on this and see the nutrition information. As with any other supermarket, they could add things to the trolley, go back on the menus, and continue on with the next products. Now, we were a little bit worried that because that was simply an experiment and people weren't actually spending their own money, that what they're going to do is that they're going to rush through this very quickly, click on every single button that they could think of and try to finish as quickly as possible. So we ran a process evaluation, and we're really assured to see that people spent about 20 minutes on the study, browsed about 25 pages, and bought about 10 products in their basket. So far, so good. Our primary outcome was the change in the percentage energy from saturated fat in the total basket. And compared with the control group that had no intervention and had about 26% of their energy from saturated fat in their final shopping basket, offering a swap reduced that by 2 percentage points, which was statistically significant and what we had powered our study to detect, because we thought that this was a clinically relevant reduction. Altering the order reduced that by 5 percentage points, and that was significantly lower both compared to the control and compared to the swaps. And combining the interventions together led to a small decrease further, but this was not significantly lower than altering the order. It was only significantly lower than swaps and the control group. What this tells us essentially is that both interventions were effective. Altering the order was more effective than swaps, and combining the two, essentially, there was no added benefit of adding the swaps. We were also pleased to see that there was no difference in the cost, which is a major challenge for many of these interventions, and there was no significant difference by group in the total shopping basket. And there was also no difference in terms of sex, age, ethnic group, BMI, education, or income. Now, moving on to the second study, of course, offering the swaps was less effective than altering the order, but many supermarkets do see this as a much more viable first step approach. So we wanted to explore a little bit further how we can actually increase the acceptance of swaps. So that was about 10% in the previous study. So although people found them quite acceptable, not a lot of people actually clicked on to accept the swaps. So what we thought was that messaging and framing may affect the choice, and typically giving people vague information on nutrition quality might not be particularly salient. On the other hand, more salient strategies, such as, for example, the PACE, or what we call the physical activity calorie equivalent, which I will explain in the next few slides, may be more effective. So the aim of this study was to test whether incrementally increasing the tangibility of the information provided with lower energy swaps this time. So what we were trying to do was to reduce the amount of calories that people ordered, if this reduced the total energy ordered in an experimental setting. So in this study, we randomized people into 4 groups. The first one was the control group, where people got their standard swap with no particular messaging, simply saying, how about swapping your standard Coke to a Coke Zero? In the second group that had the fewer calories message, there was a badge saying that this has fewer calories. In the third group, which was the numeric calorie group, we're essentially giving the exact number of calories that people saved by making this swap. And in the final physical activity calorie equivalent group, we were giving the exact number of calories and how many minutes of walking this equates to. So in this particular case, saving 208 calories, and that equates to about 46 minutes of walking. What we found was that in terms of sweet snacks, both the numeric calories and the base messaging were significantly reduced the energy content of the shopping baskets for sweet snacks. For savory snacks, which were typically crisps, we saw that all interventions were substantially reduced the energy content of the shopping basket compared to the control. However, we didn't see any effect on drinks, although there was a small trend that the base messaging might be a little bit more effective. Now, these don't look like huge changes because the control, if you look at the sweet snacks, that starts from 215 calories on average and goes down to 200 calories. But because these are only very small items, the length that we have to go through to offer an alternative that can be viable is the margin is very small. So within this context, and if this is replicated with multiple snacks throughout the week, we would be able to get a clinically meaningful difference in energy intake. So what are the implications? So of course, for research, these are experimental trials, and we do need to test the strategies in real online settings, as well as study the long-term effect on food purchasing habits. But until this time comes, online supermarkets can definitely play a much more proactive role in shaping healthier choices for their customers by knowing that both offering swaps, but also altering the order of products to prioritize the products that are more healthy can actually be very effective. So in summary, interventions to change the food purchasing are promising to nudge people into healthier choices. Altering the order and altering the environment is more effective than swaps. Increasing the tangibility of the information providing when offering a swap, it increases the effectiveness of the swap, and within this context, the physical activity calorie messaging is the most effective. I would like to thank my colleagues and collaborators, both at the University of Oxford and at UCL, and particularly Dr. Carmen Piernas, Professor Jeb, and Sarah Brithnach, and our founders, and thank you for your attention.
Amazing, Dimitris. Thank you ever so much for that. Absolutely fantastic. We've got one question in the Q&A. Remember, if you've got more questions, feel free to put them in. There's one question here, basically just asking you to describe the control group a little bit more, if you can.
Sure. So essentially, in the control group, what happened was that we didn't give any intervention at all. So participants saw all products in the random order that they were to see them in the supermarket. So there was actually no influence from us on the way that the products were ranked, and it was simply a random